Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Gana Tvam Shamsharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Gana Tasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Tasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam 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 Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhya Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nritya Gita Vaditra Madhya Manasura Sena Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shringaratanama Niramajanado Joktasya Bhaktamsya Niyonjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satvana Triptan Hari Bhakta Shangan Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satvana Triptan Kridvaiva Triptin Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Shiradikama Dhabayara Para Madhura Leela Gunarupanamna Shiradikama Dhabayara Para Madhura Leela Gunarupanamna Pratikyanasa Dhanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Pratikyanasa Dhanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Ne kunjayuno Rati kelisi dhyai Jayali virjukti Apekshaniya Ne kunjayuno Rati kelisi dhyai Jayali virjukti Tatrati Ativalabhasya Vande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Ativalabhasya Sakjadharitena Shamasta Shrastri Uktastatha Bhavyataiva Sadhavi Sakjadharitena Shamasta Shrastri Kintu Prabharja Priyaeva Tasya Vande Gora Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Gora Shri Charanara Vrindam Yasya Prasadan Bhagavat Prasado Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasadam Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Dhyayam Tuvam Stasya Yashastri Sandhyam Vande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Dhyayam Stuvam Tasya Yasastri Sandhyam Vande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Yasastri Sandhyam Vande Gura Shri Charanara Vrindam Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pachatarisha Tarine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pachatarisha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Shivasari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Nama Krishna, Jadavaya Nama Hare, Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Hare Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopina Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raguna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav, Radhe, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra, Jaya Sitaram, 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 Jaya Lakshman Hanuman, Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Pramanande, Haribo, Jayam Vishnupada Paramsa Prabhajakacharya, Ashtuttara Sarasishima Iskon Pratishta, Viviti Samstapakacharya Vaishnava Ceremony, Gaura Priyajana Krishna Prima Bhakti Datta Patita Pavana, His Divine Grace, Abhaycharavinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada Ji ki jai, Shri Gauriya Guru Vargapati Tudhar ki jai, Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatt Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatt, Das Saguna Sat Goswami Prabhu ki jai, Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ji ki jai, Jayananta Koti Vaishnavindi ki jai, Prem si Koho si Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तविंद की जय। जय परम दयाल से नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय। प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिनंदन श्रीमन गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महावरनाय अवतार की जय। गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय। जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। बृहद निदांग ट्रांसनेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय। शिशु राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपिना राधा कुंद श्याम कुंज गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। श्री ब्रज भूम वृंदावन मथुराधाम की जय। दिलो शिव शिशु राधा नील माधव की जय। श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय। परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय। श्री पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु श्रीमती सुभद्र देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय। भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशना कर सिंहरे भगवान की जय। जगंगा माई जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी महारानी वृंदी देवी भक्ति देवी की जय। बोलो श्री मथुरा रानी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौरदी प्रमानंदे। All glories to the Son of Bodies. All glories to the Son of Bodies. All glories to the Son of Bodies. All glories, glory to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga Hari.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रहलाद लात दाईने हिरण्याकाशी पूर्वक्षः शीलतंका नखलाये
शिलतंका नखलाये
इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहो
इतो नरसिंहा परतो नरसिंहो
यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहा
जतो जतो जामि ततो नरसिंहा
यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहा
जतो जतो जामि ततो नरसिंहा
बाहे नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो
बाहे नरसिंहा हृदये नरसिंहा
नरसिंहम् आदिं शरणं प्रपदे
नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे
तव करकमलवरे नाखाम् अद्भुत सिंहां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गं केशवधीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जयो जगदीश हरे जयो जगदीश हरे
अद्भुत सिंहां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गं केशवधीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
केशवधीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे, जय जगदीश हरे।
जय केशव गीत नरहरि रूप, जय जगदीश रे, जय जगदीश रे, जय जगदीश रे।
जय नरसिंहदेव, 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 जय नरसिंहदेव।
जय नृसिंहदेव, जय नृसिंहदेव, जय नृसिंहदेव, जय नृसिंहदेव।
जय प्रहलाद महाराज, प्रहलाद महाराज, प्रहलाद महाराज, जय भक्त प्रहलाद।
जय प्रहलाद महाराज, प्रहलाद महाराज, भक्त महाराज, जय प्रहलाद महाराज।
नित्य गौरा हरि बोल, हरि बोल, हरि बोल, नित्य गौरा हरि बोल।
नित्य गौर हरि बोल, हरि बोल, हरि बोल, नित्य गौर हरि बोल। जय श्री श्री भक्तिपद सर्वविघ्न विनाशना कृष्ण हरे भगवान की जय। जय भक्त श्रेष्ठ प्रहलाद महाराज की जय। गौरदि प्रमानंद हरि बोल। श्री वृंदायै तुलसीदेवाय प्रियै केशव सत्या, विष्णु भक्ति प्रादे देवे सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वृंदायै तुलसीदेवाय प्रियै केशव सत्या, विष्णु भक्ति प्रादे देवे सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वृंदायै तुलसीदेवाय प्रियै केशव सत्या, कृष्ण भक्ति प्रादे देवे सत्यवताय नमो नमः। जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण। नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी, नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी, नमो नमः।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो ऐ अभिलाषी,
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावा अभिलाषी,
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी, नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी, नमो नमः।
जे तुम्हारा शरण लोए, तारा वंचा पूर्ण होए।
जे तुम्हारा शरण लो,
कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी
कृपा कोई करा तरे वृंदावन वासी
मोरा यही अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो बास
मोराया विलास कुंज दिया
नयने हरि बो सदा जुगल रूप राशि এই নিবেদন ধারো সখীরানুগাত করো সেবা অধিকার দিয়ে করো নিজ দাসী দীনা কৃষ্ণ দাসে কোয়ে এই যে না মোরা হয়ে श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जेन भाषी श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जेन भाषी
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जेन भाषी
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani.
Maharani Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani.
Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi.
Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
तुलसी महारानी की जय.
Jai. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priya Ke Sava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satyabatai Namo Namah. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priya Ke Sava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satyabatai Namo Namah. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Ke Sava Satya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyabatai Namo Namah. Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of me, his wish is fulfilled. Bestow your myself on me, my desire that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavinams of Raj. Please give me the privilege of service and make me honor and acceptance. This very full Lord servant Krishna, please. May I always see me love Shri Radha and Govinda. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi Ki. Let's consider the 10 offenses against the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, and that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotee, to dedicate a life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of the spiritual master. 4. Blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures and customs of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to the imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider the chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which often Vedas as fruitive activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the frivolous person about the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even not understanding so many instructions on this matter. It also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success Krishna doing. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just all desire trees. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen, conditioned soul. Jai Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam Ki Jai. Chaito Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahada Vagni Nirvapanam Shri Akari Vachantika Vitaranam Vidya Vadhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivadhanam Pratipadam Purna Mrita Swadanam Sarvatmasnam Paramparam Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Baudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrarpita Niyamita Shmarane Nakala Eta Drishitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaivam idishamiya janinanuraga Trinadapi sunichaina Tarorapi saishnuna Amaninamanadena Kirtaniya sadahari Na dhanam na janam na sundarim Kavitam vajagarishaka maye Mama janmani janmanishari Bhavatar bhakti rahituki tvai Ainanda tanuja kinkaram Paritamam visame bhava buddho Kripaya tava pada pankaja Sthita duri sadrisham vichintaya Nayanam galora shrudharaya Vadanam gadagarudhaya gira Pulakir nichitam vapukara Tava nama grahane bhavisyati Jugaitam nimishena Chakusha pravasaitam Sunyaitam jagata sarvam Govinda virahe name Aslishabha padaratam pinastumam Adarshana marmahatam karotuva Jatha tathava vidadhatu lampato Matpranatastu saivana para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kestakam Ki Jai Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaura Tvishe Nama Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nivrishesha Shunnavadi Patsatyarisatarine. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire conditioned life of repeated births and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. Oh my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. Once we chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself a Lord and strolling the street, one should be more tolerant than the street, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion and service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I have fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me out from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at the yellow of the sweet. Oh my Lord, when will my eyes will be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end in the recitation of your name? Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering one moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and should remain so, even if Sandras me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kestaka Ki Jai. Shri Guru Vandan Mangala Charan Ki Jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakchurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swaparantikam Bandeyam Shri Guru Shri Jotapara-kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrijatam Sahagana Raghunatha Vintam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Patsatyadi Satarine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namini Shri Varshabhana Videvi Deitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhurjala Premadhya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Posidanta Dantaharine Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Saksharabhyamutaye Vipralambhara Sambodhe Parambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sakchit Anandanamini Guru Shakti Sarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gauravir Bhava Bhumitsvam Nirdesha Sajana Priya Vaishnavo Sarvabhumasi Jagannatayate Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaivacha Paritanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnayo Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurateshe Namaha Panchatattamakam Krishna Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam Bhakta Avataro Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Chetam Suratapangur Mama Mandamatir Gatir Masavasra Param Bhujo Radha Madana Mohana Divyavindaranya Kalpadumadha Shmaranagar Shingasanastu Shmaradha Shila Govinda Devo Pristali Visheva Manushmarami Shman Rasarasaram Bhivam Shvata Tatastita Karshan Venusvanar Gopir Gopinata Shri Suna Tapta Kanchana Gurangi Radhe Vrindavanishari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki
Jai
Shrimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj ki
Jai
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol. So today we're discussing Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3. We're going to go over chapter 8. Verse number 21. We're going back to this one. Let me just see 1 second here. Yeah, okay. So, text 21. And it says, Tato nivrito pratilabdha kama Tato nivrito pratilabdha kama Swadishniyam asadya punasadeva Swadishniyam asada punasadeva Sanirjita swasva nivritta chitto Yasidad aruda samadhi yoga Tata thereafter. Nivrita, retired from that endeavor. Aprati labdha kama, without achievement of the desired destination. Swadhisnyam, own seat. Asadya, reaching. Puna, again. Sa, he. Deva, the demigod. Sanai, without delay. Jita swasa, controlling the breathing. Nivrita, retired. Chitta, intelligence. Nyasidat, sat down. Aruda, in confidence. Samadhi, yoga, in meditation on the Lord. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Thereafter, being unable to achieve the desired destination, he retired from such searching and came back again to the top of the lotus. Thus, controlling all objectives, he concentrated his mind on the Supreme Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So this is a description of Brahma trying to figure out who he is and what is his purpose in life. And this is before the material creation has taken place. Samadhi involves concentrating the mind upon the supreme cause of all, even if one is unaware of whether his actual nature is personal, impersonal, or localized. Concentration of the mind on the Supreme is certainly a form of devotional service. To cease from personal sense endeavors and to concentrate on the Supreme Cause is a sign of self-surrender. And when self-surrender is present, that is a sure sign of devotional service. Each and every living entity needs to engage in devotional service to the Lord if he wishes to understand the ultimate cause of his existence. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, this is something that we can all experience in Krishna consciousness. What is that? Well, if we decide, due to, let's say, having vast amount of experience in the material world, that everything else is a waste of time. There's only one thing that really counts, and that's Krishna consciousness. Now, not everyone comes to that realization. Most people have so many things to do in the material world that they don't come to such a realization. But here we see, by studying Brahma and his experience, he is highly intelligent, most intelligent person, but he's appearing before the material creation has taken place, and he can't figure out who he is and what his purpose in life is. But he gets a chance to hear something, and that is the syllables tapa. And because he has lived previously, he remembers from his previous life what that means. Those are two syllables of the Sanskrit alphabet. It means engage in acts of tapasya, or sacrifice. And what is that sacrifice? Brahma understands that he should focus his mind completely on Krishna and nothing else. So that's why Prabhupada says samadhi involves concentrating the mind upon the supreme cause of all, even if one is unaware of whether his actual nature is personal, impersonal, localized. So in other words, you might not know if God is a person, or impersonal, or present in your heart as Paramatma. You might not know that. But samadhi means you decide to concentrate your mind on the supreme cause of everything. Concentration of the mind on the supreme is certainly a form of devotional service. So many people will attest to this, that they got to a certain point in their life where they started praying to God without knowing exactly who God is. Some people think he's Jesus, some people think he's impersonal, some people think he's Krishna, but they pray, please help me. I'm suffering in this world. I really don't know what to do. I'm lost. I'm praying to you. Please help me. So when someone says that and means it, Krishna will send a devotee to that person. And I know it happened to me, and other people also have told me that they had that same type of experience. So concentration of mind on the Supreme is certainly a form of devotional service. To cease from personal sense endeavors and to concentrate on the supreme cause is a sign of self-surrender. So when you decide to do this, or when a person decides to do this, this is a type of devotional service, and it's a symbol of surrendering oneself to God. And when self-surrender is present, that is a sure sign of devotional service. Each and every living entity needs to engage in devotional service to the Lord if he wishes to understand the ultimate cause of his existence. So, for us in Krishna consciousness, we have, right from the beginning, more knowledge than most people have of who is God, and secondly, how we can surrender to God. And third, be engaged in devotional service. Other people have to figure all these things out. But when you come to Krishna consciousness, right from the beginning, you learn these things. And therefore, we can immediately engage in devotional service, whereas other people might have to go through years and years and many lifetimes to find what is the most important thing that they should be doing to approach God or Krishna. So, and the Maha Mantra is related to all this. The meaning of the Maha Mantra is related to all this. For example, it says, this is something you can learn. I'll send it to you. My dear Lord Krishna, although I have forgotten you for so many long years in the material world, today I am surrendering unto you. I am your sincere and serious servant. Please engage me in your service. This is one translation of the Maha Mantra. And it's a very nice thing to say every day, because it explains our heartfelt desire to be always in Krishna consciousness. So maybe you can repeat after me. My dear Lord Krishna,
My dear Lord Krishna,
although I have forgotten you
although I've forgotten you
for so many long years
for so many long years
in the material world,
in the material world,
today I am surrendering
today I am surrendering
unto you.
unto you.
I am your sincere and serious servant.
I am your sincere, serious servant.
Please engage me in your service.
Please engage me in your service.
So that is a translation of the Maha Mantra. There's another translation. It says, my dear Lord, and the spiritual energy of the Lord, Srimati Radharani, kindly engage me in your service. I am now embarrassed with this material service. Please engage me in your eternal service. So it's another translation of the Mahamantra. Then there's even more. Let's see, where it says, a second. Or I'll have to come back to this. All right, so these types of statements lead to complete surrender to the Lord. That's what the meaning of the Mahamantra is. And I did say yesterday that I was going to show, I forgot the book though, so I'll have to do that tomorrow. Okay, so now yesterday we discussed what's called the Varnashram Dharma system, which is, in one sense, the lower Dharma, and then the higher Dharma, or Swadharma, of that one can achieve. So let me go over that again, and I'm going to give a lot more information now of what that means. So as long as one is not satisfied by fruitive activity and has not awakened the taste for devotional service by hearing and chanting about Lord Vishnu or Krishna and the 9 processes of devotional service, one has to act according to the regulative principles of the Vedic injunctions. Okay, this is a verse, Madhya Lila 9.266. In other words, one should be situated in the Varnashram Dharma system. Now, what is our position in Krishna consciousness? In Krishna consciousness, we have brahmacharis, grihastas, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. And we have brahmanas and kshatriyas and vaishyas and sudras. Well, the brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and sudras, we definitely have brahmanas. We don't have hardly any kshatriyas. There's a lot of vaishyas and a lot of sudras. So this is the Varnashram system, but it's called Daiva Varnashram. Daiva Varnashram means we're focused on Krishna through these different positions of how we are influenced by the modes of material nature. Now, but there's a higher Dharma, and that is explained in the 18th chapter, 66th verse, where Krishna says, Sarva Dharma Prityaja Mamekam Saranam Prajaham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshisyami Masuchaha. He says, look, Arjuna, give up all your different dharmas and surrender only unto me. And if you do this, I promise you that I will protect you and free you from all karmic reactions. Therefore, there's no reason to hesitate, there's no reason to doubt, there's no reason to be fearful. Okay, so now, a little bit further into that 1866 purport, Prabhupada quotes the higher Varnashram Dharma principle, Anukulyana Sankalpa Pratikulyana Varjanam Raksisya Titi Visvaso Goptritve Varanam Tata Atmaniksepa Karpanye Sadvida Saranagati. Okay, so this is the process of complete surrender to the Lord. And it has 6 steps. So the first is that one accepts everything favorable for Krishna consciousness. Okay, now, we're talking about what's called the lower dharma and the higher dharma. Dharma means occupational duties, what you're obliged to do. So while we're still influenced by the modes of material nature, we engage in the Varnashram Dharma, which helps us to gradually come up to the level of Krishna consciousness. And then we are promoted to the higher dharma, or occupational duties, that's pure devotional service. And it has 6 types of surrender that identifies a person who is actually qualified in that higher state of surrender to the Lord. So the first is accepting everything favorable for Krishna consciousness, and the second is rejecting everything unfavorable. Now, this is very interesting because when we make such decisions, we make a lot of quick devotional service or quick advancement spiritually. So, then number 3 is completely depending on Krishna as our protector. We don't have anything else that we depend on. We don't depend on a 401k, we don't depend on relatives, we don't depend on anything or anyone else. We just have complete faith that Krishna is going to protect us. Okay, and then after that, Goptritre Varanam Tata. So that means that we should always think that we are helpless, and we should consider Krishna the only basis for our progress in life. Now that's something that's a hard thing for people to adjust to. That, in other words, always think that we are helpless, but we are helpless because anything can happen to us at any time. And to think that Krishna is the only basis for our progress in life. And this further means to maintain the attitude of complete gratitude to Krishna, because he's giving us a chance to free ourselves from the cycle of birth and death. And therefore, we completely depend on him, and we don't have any fears of in this world, because we're absolutely sure of his maintenance and his protection. See? And we have a great sense of gratitude toward Krishna for this. And then the next one is what you would call Atman Niksepa. Atman Niksepa means by engagement in devotional service to Krishna, in full Krishna consciousness, at once we become freed from all contamination of material nature. That's called Atman Niksepa. That is, that the simple surrender to Krishna will save one from wasting time. One can make all progress at once and be free from all sinful reactions. So that means, further, it means that we are convinced that everything that we have actually belongs to Krishna and should be used in his service. So these are all very profound concepts. And these are all signs of complete surrender to the Lord. If we take it seriously, we become very, let's say, quickly advanced in Krishna consciousness without fear, without anxiety, and without doubt. And then finally, karpanye, feeling meek and humble, or insignificant, or wretched, and materially destitute. Well, that's not a negative thing, because when we feel like that, we become very connected to Krishna. It's just like a baby. It's connected to the mother. Without the help of the mother, the baby will die. Right? So in the same way, we become like that in our relationship with Krishna. We completely depend on him. Okay. So another translation of the Mahamantra is, I am the abode of all sins, utterly helpless, and without any other recourse. O Lord, you alone must be my means. Such a condition of mind is called saranagati, surrender to the Lord. So, now this is explained in depth in the Bhagavad Gita in different places. So now we're going to see where all these things are in the Bhagavad Gita. Because Bhagavad Gita has everything in it. So if we go to Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 31st verse. Let's take a look at that. Where it says, Swadharmam apichaviksya na vikampitum arhasi dharmyat di yudyat shreyonyat kshatriyasya cha vidyate. So Krishna says to Arjuna, considering your specific duty, okay, what is that specific duty? Swadharma, one's own religious principles of service to the Lord. So, considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, Arjuna, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there's no need for hesitation. Well, Arjuna at this point is hesitating. He doesn't want to fight, and he's coming up with what seems to be really valid reasons. You know, how can he kill the grandsire of the Kuru dynasty, Bhisma Pitamaha? How can he kill his own guru, Dronacharya? These are very sinful things to do. So Prabhupada explains in the purport, out of the 4 orders of social administration, the second order for the matter of good administration is called Kshatriya. Kshat means hurt. One who gives protection from harm is called Kshatriya. Trayate, to give protection. The Kshatriyas are trained for killing in the forest. A Kshatriya would go into the forest and challenge a tiger face to face and fight with the tiger with his sword. When the tiger was killed, it would be offered the royal order of cremation. This system has been followed even up to the present day by the Kshatriyas, kings of Jaipur state. The Kshatriyas are specifically trained for challenging and killing because religious violence is sometimes a necessary factor. Therefore, Kshatriyas are never meant for accepting directly the order of sannyasa or renunciation. Nonviolence in politics may be a diplomacy, but it is never a factor or principle. In the religious law books, it is stated, in the battlefield, a king or Kshatriya, while fighting another king, envious of him, is eligible for achieving heavenly planets after death, as the Brahmanas also attain the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire. Therefore, killing on the battlefield on religious principles and killing animals in the sacrificial fire are not at all considered to be acts of violence, because everyone is benefited by the religious principles involved. The animal sacrificed gets a human life immediately without undergoing the gradual evolutionary process from one form to another, and the Kshatriyas killed on the battlefield also attain the heavenly planets, as do the Brahmanas who attain them by offering sacrifice. Okay, so that is part of the mundane type of duty. But now, Prabhupada explains something more significant. He says, there are two kinds of swadharmas, specific duties. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with religious principles in order to achieve liberation. So everybody has a body, right? As long as our body is still under the influence of the modes of material nature, we have to act in the Varnashram system, because that will help us gradually come up to the higher dharma, which is explained as the 6 types of surrender to the Lord. When one is liberated, one's swadharma, specific duty, becomes spiritual and is not in the material bodily concept. In the bodily concept of life, there are specific duties for the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas respectively, and such duties are unavoidable. Swadharma is ordained by the Lord, and this will be clarified in the 4th chapter. On the bodily plane, Swadharma is called Varnashram Dharma, or man's stepping stone for spiritual understanding. Human civilization begins from the stage of Varnashram Dharma, or specific duties in terms of the specific modes of nature of the body obtained. Discharging one's specific duty in any field of action in accordance with the orders of higher authorities serves to elevate one to a higher status of life. Okay, so now we go to the 4th chapter, 19th verse, Bhagavad Gita. So all this is in the Bhagavad Gita, and it's from the 19th verse to the 23rd verse, and it says, 4:19, one is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. So now we're coming up to the spiritual swadharma, or pure devotee, pure Krishna consciousness. In the purport it says, only a person in full knowledge can understand the activities of a person in Krishna consciousness, because the person in Krishna consciousness is devoid of all kinds of sense gratificatory propensities. It is to be understood that he has burned up the reactions of his work by perfect knowledge of his constitutional position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is actually learned, who has attained to such perfection of knowledge. Development of this knowledge of eternal servitorship to the Lord is compared to fire. Such a fire, once kindled, can burn up all kinds of reactions to work. So this is one of those important verses that says, Yasya sarve samaramba kama sankalpa varjita jana agni dagda karmanam tamahu panditam buddha. So when it says jana agni dagda karmanam, all karma is burned, is wiped out by one who every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. And he is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. So you see, the fire of perfect knowledge burns up all our karma. Right? Then text 20. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. So now this is description of the superior dharma, or pure Krishna consciousness. And it's right here in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 4th chapter. And Prabhupada explains in the purport, this freedom from the bondage of actions is possible only in Krishna consciousness, when one is doing everything for Krishna. A Krishna conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of the action. He's not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his possession. He does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he were not doing anything. This is the sign of akarma, or actions without fruitive reactions. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness, is binding upon the worker, and that is the real aspect of vikarma, as explained herein before. Okay, vikarma means sinful activities. There's karma, vikarma, and akarma. So karma means acting according to the Vedic instructions, but with still having attachment to the result. And vikarma means acting against the Vedic instructions, which is completely sinful. And akarma is acting according to the Vedic instructions, but without attachment to the result, and offering the result completely to the Lord. Okay, so we'll see. I'm just going to fast forward to this and then come back again. In the 5th chapter, fifth chapter, 12th verse, sorry. Yukta karma phalam tyakva santim apnukti naistikim ayukta kamakarena phale sakto nibadyate. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me, meaning Krishna. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. So there it is. That explains the difference between karma and akarma. Akarma means one is completely dedicated to serving Krishna and has no attachment to enjoy the results of the activity. He's offering everything to Krishna. Whereas karma, one is acting according to the Vedas, but still has attachment to the result. So what happens to such a person? It says, whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. And Prabhupada explains here in the purport, the difference between a person in Krishna consciousness and a person in bodily consciousness is that the former is attached to Krishna, whereas the latter is attached to the results of his activities. The person who is attached to Krishna and works for him only is certainly a liberated person, and he has no anxiety over the results of his work. In the Bhagavad Gita, the cause of anxiety over a result of an activity is explained as being in one's functioning in the conception of duality, that is, without knowledge of the absolute truth. Krishna is the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. In Krishna consciousness, there's no duality. All that exists is a product of Krishna's energy, and Krishna is all good. Therefore, activities in Krishna consciousness are on the absolute plane. They are transcendental and have no material effect. One is therefore filled with peace in Krishna consciousness. But one who is entangled in profit calculation for sense gratification cannot have that peace. This is the secret of Krishna consciousness. Realization that there is no existence besides Krishna is the platform of peace and fearfulness. Well, let's look at the news. In the news, you'll see so many people who are attached to the result of what they're doing, they get caught. Like stock agents, they get caught cheating their clients. And people who are like Elon Musk or Bill Gates, they get caught cheating on their wife. And politicians, they get caught taking bribes. And we can go down a list. There's a whole bunch of these things happening every day. It's in the news every day, all over the world. And why? Because they're attached to the result. They're not satisfied by following the rules. They'll take the risk of breaking the rules because of their lusty desires. So we can see how the same thing can happen in spiritual life. As long as we have some material motive, we'll get caught cheating. But if we don't have any material motive, we just have pure desire to please Krishna, then it's unlimited how many of those desires can be satisfied by Krishna, because there's no personal agenda. There's only serving the Lord. So now we continue. Fourth chapter, verse number 21. It says, Nirasya yata chitatma tyakva sarva parigraha sarinam kevalam karma kurvan napnati kilbasam. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. In other words, no karma affects him. Right? And in the purport, so, okay, what is this leading to? It's leading to having only pure desires to please Krishna and no selfish desires. That is that is the way to become actually successful in spiritual life. When you only have pure desires to please Krishna. And it says, a Krishna conscious person does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme, or by Krishna. When the hand moves, it does not move out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. A Krishna conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire, meaning Krishna's desire. For he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine. As a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance, so a Krishna conscious man maintains himself by his work, just to remain fit for action in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession. Yet the animal does not protest, nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna conscious person fully engaged in self-realization has very little time to falsely possess any material object. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not, therefore, become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions. So we see almost every day people being caught cheating on the stock market, cheating in business, cheating on their wives or their husband, and cheating in all different ways, right? Because they can't control their mind and senses. They have these material desires, and they have these lusty, very powerful lusty desires, and it gets them in trouble. So, if they would read Bhagavad Gita, they would see that they would have much more success by completely being honest. And not only honest, being a devotee of the Lord. So then the next verse says, Yadricha labda santusto dvandvai atito vimatsara samak silhav asidho cha kritva pi na nipadyate. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy. Duality is the big problem. People get sidetracked by dualities. Like, for example, the number one duality, the difference between the body and the soul. People get sidetracked. They identify with the body instead of with the soul. And that they get sidetracked their whole life and have to take birth over and over again because of that duality. That's the fundamental duality. There's no duality in the spiritual world. What does that mean? Well, there are different living entities in the spiritual world, infinite number of them. But they are all part and parcel of Krishna. And they act like that. Whereas in the material world, we're not acting like part and parcel of Krishna. We're acting like we're independent of Krishna. See? Because we're attached to the body and not to the soul, and not to Paramatma. So that type of duality, mundane duality, gets us in trouble all the time. But the spiritual duality, that is, we're simultaneously one and different. Achintya Beda Abeda Tattva, that is a type of duality, but it's simultaneously one and inconceivably different. That is spiritual duality in the spiritual world, where it's not actually duality because we're all one by cooperating with Krishna. You see, when you have a large group of people that cooperate together, you can do miracles. But if you have people arguing all the time and having their own vested interests, then nothing gets done, or very, very little gets done. So the spiritual world is based on everybody working together cooperatively. And in the material world, people grudgingly work cooperatively, but it usually ends up in people fighting and arguing and so forth, unfortunately. Okay, so it says, he who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. So you notice it says, who is steady. Steady doing what? Steady in devotional service, in both success and failure. So there might be a failure, they don't give up devotional service. There might be great success, they don't give up devotional service. So in the purport it says, a Krishna conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He never begs, nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as is in his power, and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge. This is amazing purport. You see, these verses are explaining what is the superior Swadharma. And then the last verse, text 23. Gata sangasya sanmuktasya jnana vastita chetasa yagya acharata karma samagram pravavilyate. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Any material attachment will keep us in the material world. Any material attachment, even the slightest material attachment, will keep us from being liberated from this material world. So it says, the work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Becoming fully Krishna conscious, one is freed from all dualities and thus is free from the contaminations of the material modes. So what does it mean to be free from all dualities? That means we only do what is pleasing to Guru and Krishna. That's what it means. We don't do anything else. We only do those things that are pleasing. So therefore, it's the first principle of surrender. The first principle of surrender is anukulyasya sankalpa. Only accept to do things that are pleasing to Krishna. There it is. That's the first principle of surrender. So, becoming fully Krishna conscious, one is free from all dualities and thus is free from the contamination of material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. In other words, cannot be sidelined or taken away from Krishna consciousness. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices because sacrifice aims at satisfying the supreme person, Vishnu or Krishna. The resultant reactions to all such works certainly merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. Okay, so these are the very important verses in the fourth chapter that explain what is anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam reksisya iti vishvaso gotritve varanam tata atmaniksepa karpanye sadvida saranagati. This explains what is actually saranagati, surrender to the Lord. And this is the higher swadharma. Okay, so there's more information to this. In the third chapter, 30th verse. Let's go to that. Third chapter, 30th verse says, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyad yatma chetasa nirasir nirmamo Bhutva Yudyashva Vikita Jwara. You see how the Bhagavad Gita is very poetic. Everything rhymes, everything's in meter. It's just beautiful. It's simple, it's not complicated. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, meaning laziness, fight. So, these are amazing verses. So in the purport it said, this verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord instructs that one has to become fully Krishna conscious to discharge duties, as if in military discipline. What's military discipline? If you don't do it, they put you in jail. Right? Such an injunction may make things a little difficult. Nevertheless, duties must be carried out with dependence on Krishna, because that is the constitutional position of a living entity. The living entity cannot be happy, independent of the cooperation of the Supreme Lord, because the eternal constitutional position of a living entity is to become subordinate to the desires of the Lord. There it is. We should always be subordinate to the desires of the Lord. Whatever the Lord wants, that's what we should do. The living entity cannot be happy, independent of the cooperation of the Supreme Lord, because the eternal constitutional position of the living entity is to become subordinate to the desires of the Lord. Arjuna was therefore ordered by Sri Krishna to fight as if the Lord were his military commander. One has to sacrifice everything for the goodwill of the Supreme Lord, and at the same time discharge prescribed duties without claiming proprietorship. Arjuna did not have to consider the order of the Lord. He had only to execute his order. In other words, he didn't have to question the order of the Lord. He should just do it. The Supreme Lord is the soul of all souls. Therefore, one who depends solely and wholly on the Supreme Soul without personal consideration, or in other words, one who is fully Krishna conscious, is called Adhyatma Chetas. Okay, what does Adhyatma Chetas mean? It means with full knowledge of the self and consciousness that one is part and parcel of Krishna. Now, who believes that they are part and parcel of Krishna? Not everybody. They believe they're part and parcel of being a member of the white Protestant people, or the black African people, or this people, or that people, right? How many people identify themselves as part and parcel of Krishna? Very, very few, you see. So we're trying to understand that we are eternally part and parcel of Krishna. We're not part and parcel of this or that. We're not part and parcel of Andhra, or part and parcel of Telangana, or part and parcel of Bangladesh. This is the problem. We're identifying ourselves as part and parcel of something that's wrong. And it says, Arjuna did not have to consider the order of the Lord. He had only to execute his order. The Supreme Lord is the soul of all souls. Therefore, one who depends solely and wholly on the Supreme Soul without personal consideration, or in other words, one who is fully Krishna conscious, is called Adhyatma Chetas. That is, conscious of full knowledge of who he is in relationship to Krishna. Nirasi means that one has to act on the order of the master, but should not expect fruitive results. The cashier may count millions of dollars for his employer, but he does not claim a cent for himself. Similarly, one who has to realize that nothing in the world belongs to any individual person, but that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord, That is the real purport of Mayi, or unto me. And when one acts in such Krishna consciousness, certainly he does not claim proprietorship over anything. This consciousness is called nirmama, or nothing is mine. And if there is any reluctance to execute such a stern order, which is without consideration of so-called kinsmen in the bodily relationship, that reluctance should be thrown off. In this way, one may become vigata jwara, or without feverish mentality or lethargy, meaning laziness. Feverish mentality. What's feverish mentality? It's just, oh, if I give everything to Krishna, then I won't have anything left. Oh my God, I can't do that. Right? That's a feverish mentality. That's why people get, flummoxed, confused, because they think, well, how can I give everything to Krishna? That doesn't make sense. And if there's any reluctance to execute such a stern order, which is without consideration of so-called kinsmen in the bodily relationship, that reluctance should be thrown off. In this way, one may become vigata jwara, or without feverish mentality or lethargy. Everyone, according to his quality and position, has a particular type of work to discharge, and all such duties may be discharged in Krishna consciousness as described above. That will lead one to the path of liberation. Now, this, of course, is pure Krishna consciousness. Are we on the level of pure Krishna consciousness? In some way we are, and in some way we're not. As long as we have a lot of mundane responsibilities, we have to do our best. But we can't do everything, because that would jeopardize the people that depend on us. So, therefore, but we have to always keep our eye on what the real goal is. And as time goes on, things change. And if we are keeping our eye on the goal, then when things change in the right direction, we can be 100% engaged. As long as we have these mundane, let's say, responsibilities, we have to balance things. Balance means that we always find ways of chanting our rounds and following the regulative principles. That will balance things. If we're not doing that, then it goes way out of balance and will fall down. So one thing that we cannot compromise on are the 4 regulative principles and chanting 16 good rounds a day. That will keep the balance, even though we have so many material duties. But you'll see as you go along, and time goes by fast, the situation changes, and all of a sudden, you see an open space where you can be 100% Krishna conscious. So then, the last verse, it says, those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions, Krishna says, and who follows this teaching faithfully, without envy, becomes free from the bondage of fruitive activities. So there it is. That's a very important verse. And the purport says, the injunction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom, and therefore is eternally true without exception. So what is an injunction? It's an order. It's an official order that you can't really ignore. As the Vedas are eternal, so this truth of Krishna consciousness is also eternal. One should have firm faith in this injunction without envying the Lord. Oh, so what is he talking about? Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions. In other words, what the word injunction means, authoritative warning, or order. That's an injunction. It's an authoritative warning or an order. So one should have firm faith in the injunctions without envying the Lord. There are many philosophers who write comments on the Bhagavad Gita but have no faith in Krishna. They will never be liberated from the bondage of fruit of action. In other words, unless we come eventually to the point of complete surrender to Krishna, we will not be able to completely surrender. Because when you completely surrender, you see miraculous things happening. But if you don't completely surrender, those miraculous things don't happen, and people become recidivists. That's a good word, recidivist. It means they go back to being karmis. They will never be liberated from the bondage of fruit of action. But an ordinary man with firm faith in the eternal injunctions, those are authoritative orders, of the Lord, even though unable to execute such orders, become liberated from the bondage of the law of karma. Whoa, that's a big statement. Let's read that again. But an ordinary man with firm faith in the eternal injunctions of the Lord, even though unable to execute such orders, becomes liberated from the bondage of the law of karma. In the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. Okay, so this is today's lesson. We're explaining what is the lower swadharma, or occupational duties, and the higher swadharma, or pure Krishna consciousness. Lower swadharma is varnashram system. The higher swadharma is pure Krishna consciousness. But it's a big subject. If we take these purports that we read, so you have the second chapter, 31st verse. Oh, wait a minute, there's some more. There's 18th chapter, 46th and 47th verse. I didn't read. Anyway, Bhagavad Gita, second chapter, 31st verse. Bhagavad Gita, fourth chapter, 19th to 23rd verse. Bhagavad Gita, third chapter, 30th to 35th verse. And the Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, 46th, 47th verse. And Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, 66th verse. So your homework for next week is Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, 46th, 47th verse, and Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, 66th verse, or your homework for tomorrow. The two verses that I didn't cover, which is the culmination of this whole subject. What is the higher swadharma, or pure Krishna consciousness? Okay, are there any questions? See, there's one thing I didn't cover today, which I was going to, but I forgot to bring the book. That is, I was going to show from the second canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. You see, this history of Brahma is being discussed over and over again, with more and more details given in the different books of the Bhagavatam, because the example of Brahma is very important if you want to understand what Krishna consciousness is, right? So I can go over this tomorrow. I'm going to show things that are discussed in the earlier parts of this third canto and in the previous second canto about this story of Brahma and how he became enlightened, being born as the first living entity before the material creation, and how he found out who he actually is and what his duty is in life, and what is his and his surrender to the Lord. It's very important that we understand this. Okay, go ahead.
So Maharaj, at least when we are preaching or talking to people, even we were in the past, maybe like let's say when I talk to my parents in the past, and so, they used to think that they are doing an honest living. Means like just not just like a bank clerk, not stealing the money, but they're just honestly living and so
Right.
on. So is there someone like particularly an atheist or not knowing Krishna particularly, can there be a person who can actually live in honest living, or is there just a misconception?
Well, let's say they're a Christian, right? Most Christians eat meat. So right there, that's a big no. Although they might be honest in business dealings. They might be honest in maintaining their family. But because they're eating meat or doing other things, that break the regulative principles, their mind is still on the material level. It's not on a pure spiritual level. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita and in Srimad Bhagavatam, where it says, let's see where it is. Yasyasti bhakti bhagavat yachinkanana akinchana sarvir gunas tatra samasate sura harava bhaktasya kuto mahatguna mano ratanasati tahavato bayi. One who has unflinching devotion for the personality of Godhead has all the good qualities of the demigods, but one who is not a devotee of the Lord has only material qualifications that are of little value. This is because he's hovering on the mental plane and is certain to be attracted by the glaring material energy. Srimad Bhagavatam 5:18-12. So, sometimes people have difficulty understanding this verse because they say, well, I know people that are honest, they don't cheat anyone, they go to church, and it seems to me they're even better than the Hare Krishna people. But actually, the answer is no. Yes, they are pious. Yes, they are honest. But because they don't have proper knowledge, they're committing sinful activities. And they're on the material level. So, someone can figure out, look, I have a better life if I'm just honest and not greedy. You don't have to be a member of the Hare Krishna movement to come to a conclusion like that. There are a lot of people that come to that conclusion. Look, I'll pay my taxes. I'll work honestly. I'm not going to be greedy. I'm not going to cheat people. Right? There are a lot of people like that. But that doesn't mean they are pure devotees. It means that they are good karmis, but they have some bad habits also because of misinformation, such as eating meat, maybe gambling, maybe drinking wine, maybe engaging in illicit activities. So, like for example, there are many, many stories like this. A husband and wife were married 60, 70 years. And they both die almost at the same time, holding hands. Have you seen articles like that? Right. Now, are they pure devotees? And then you see them, they're in the hospice, and they put them together, and they both die almost at the same time, holding hands. Right. So, they're not pure devotees, but they were good karmis, right? But they're still karmis. They're still materialistic people, right? They have the bodily concept of life. And they're attached into each other's body. So they're much better than the low-class karmis. Much, much better.
Will there be any progression? Let's say such people, when they leave this body, in their consciousness in the next lifetime, is there any progress, or they might?
Yeah, if they had just a little bit of association with devotees, yeah, there'd be a lot of progress. Without that association, well, they might attain heavenly planets for a certain period of time and then come back again, right? But there's always a mixed bag of let's say they're farmers and they were killing chickens and killing cows and eating them, so because they don't know any better. See, you have to pray to God at one point. Like I don't know if you were here when I said this. I said it earlier. I know many people, and I know myself. At one point, I was so frustrated in life. I was praying to God, even though I don't know exactly who God is, right, at that time. I'm praying to God, please help me. I'm suffering and I need help. And that's when I met the devotees. So when a person actually says something like that, even though they don't know exactly who God is, but they pray to God, please help me, Krishna will send a devotee to that person. So, but if you never come to that point, because you're living in a mode of goodness and everything's going all right, and you're honest and you follow the rules of society, not necessarily the rules of spiritual life, but the rules of society. So you have a good life, and you think, oh well, this is the perfection of life, but it's not. There's still a big area of reality that's missing because they don't have real spiritual knowledge. But they might take birth on heavenly planets for some time. Okay? Yes,
Mentioned about the attitude of gratitude towards the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Atmaniksepa. Atmaniksepa. Where it says, I'm sorry, it's Gotrite Varanam Tata. Maintain an attitude of gratitude toward God. In other words, one accepts Krishna as the master and maintainer. This is point number 4. And one should always think himself helpless and should consider Krishna the only basis for his progress in life. He's our maintainer. So this is the 4th aspect of complete surrender to the Lord. And you always are grateful to the Lord for helping. Okay, Gopal Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hari Bol.
My question is, what does sacrifice mean?
Sacrifice means, let's say you have a toy and you're really attached to your toy. But there's another boy that's always looking at your toy. Then you sacrifice your toy by giving it to him. Because you know how much he wants to have your toy. He doesn't have one. So you give your toy to him. That means you sacrificed something that you're attached to, but you see someone else who doesn't have what you have, and you want to make them happy. So you sacrifice your toy so they can become happy. Are you willing to do that? That's the question. That's the question. Now you know what sacrifice means. You have to give up something that you're attached to, but in order to help someone else. Now, That's the material aspect of sacrifice. The spiritual aspect of sacrifice is you give everything to Krishna. You give everything to Krishna. That's a sacrifice, spiritual sacrifice. Okay? Hari Bol. All right, I guess we'll stop there, unless there's another question.
Example is very powerful.
What?
For a young boy, it's the toy, but for us, everything else that we are trying
For us,
to read.
it's a BMW, right? Or it's a necklace that's worth $10,000 or something. Haribol.
Padma Kevala Bhakti Swadma Bandhu Moi Savadhana Mate
Bandhu Mui Sabadhanamate
Jahara Prasade Bhai E Bhavaturiya Jai
Janar Prasade Bhai E Bhavaturiya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy Te
Krishna Prabhi Hoya Hoite
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Te Koriya Aikya
Janar Padma Vakya Chitte Koriya Aikya
Arana Kori Ho Mane Asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttamagati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttamagati
Je Prasad Pure Sarva Asha
Prasade Pure Sarva Asa
Chakshudan Dilo जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
ये ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाशा जाते
जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जते
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाशा जाते
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जते
वेद गाय जहाँ रचरितो
वेदे गाय प्रचलितो
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनारा बंधु
गुरु करुणा सिंधु अदन जनर बंधु
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनारा बंधु
गुरु करुणा सिंधु अदन जनर बंधु
लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
तेरा जीवाना
हा हा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पाद छाया हा हा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पाद छाया एबे जास कुशु त्रिभुवाना प्रभुपाद पतित पवना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने
विष्णुपदाय कृष्णवेष्टाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्या देशतारिणे
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिशतारिणे
नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने
विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमती वेदांत स्वामी
सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवाणी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva.
Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Jai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajgachasta Tarasatara Shri Shimad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktavinda ki jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kundara Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktavinda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanand. All glories to Samad, all glories to Samad, all glories to Samad, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavani ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet, great honor, reverence.
My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Lokanatha Goswami, O Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. Pad ki jai.